have I got another long ranking list for you guys. This time I'm going to be ranking the bosses from one of my favorite series of games, Dark Souls. I gotta find some use for my recorded boss fights from 3 years ago. So much like my Dead Rising ranking, I'll be ranking them from what I think is the worst boss to the best boss. This list is only going to include Dark Souls 1 through 3 and their DLC, so no other Souls-like games like Bloodborne or Elden Ring. I haven't actually even beat Elden Ring yet, to be honest. I'm like 60 hours in and I haven't beaten it yet. Maybe I'll do those other games in the future if I'm bored. I ranked each boss the same way I did my Dead Rising video, if I think the fights are fun or not. There's a bunch of other aspects involved, like the travel there and maybe what you get for beating them. I didn't incorporate lore into the ranking because I'm not that big of a lore buff. So let's get started. In total, there are 92 bosses spread across all 3 games, with Dark Souls 2 making up half of the list with 41 bosses. Jesus Christ. And I bet you can guess what my least favorite boss is. Number 92, Bed of Chaos. Who would have guessed that the Bed of Chaos, of all things, would be my least favorite boss in the series? I bet not a single one of you thought so. I don't think anyone has had a good time fighting this thing. Firstly, this fight is a lot different compared to other fights in the game. It's similar to something like the Dragon God from Demon Souls, where you need to break the chains on the sides and then enter through the middle at the end. It doesn't sound awful, but you have no idea if you've never fought this guy. Breaking the first chain isn't so bad, but afterwards all hell erupts. The ground starts to break apart, and the bed spawns a flame claw thingy that's hard to see and dodge. In fact, every attack this boss has is almost impossible to avoid because you're not looking at them most of the time. I'm too busy focusing on not trying to fall into the instant death pit, but oh shit, a hand from off screen slapped me down into the hole and I have to respawn and run my ass all the way back to the fight. After breaking the second chain, you need to jump down a path in the middle. Good luck because it's so easy to misalign the jump or get stuck in the bed's arms. But after all of that, the true form of the Bed of Chaos is a dumb bug which dies in one hit. What an absolute shit show this fight was. Now to be positive for a second, you can avoid some bullshit by using arrows to break the chains, and your progress of breaking the chains saves after each death, so you don't have to do it over and over again. It alleviates some of the bullcrap. But it's not enough to make me say it's any better. Number 91, Twin Dragon Riders. I know the Souls series likes to reuse bosses, but in most cases they're changed enough to stand out from the original variant. The Twin Dragon Riders are not one of those. They basically just took the original Dragon Rider fight from the beginning of the game, gave him a bit more health I think, and stuck him in a room with another Dragon Rider that fights with a bow from up high, and that's it. Creativity at its finest. I guess the one shooting you is kind of annoying, but only because you can't really see him. You can get the other Dragon Rider to break the pedestal he's standing on to bring him down to the ground. He has way less health and can be killed so quickly it's comical. And then you kill the one with more health and win. Wow, wasn't that epic fighting the first boss in the game again? You'd think Drain Lake Castle would have had better security than this, but oh well. Number 90. Ludden the King's Pets. This might be surprising to some of you, but I really hate this fight. First off, it's just the Ava fight from earlier, but now there are 2 of them. Ooh. It's also inside of paid DLC, so you spent money on 3 more bosses, and one of them is just a clone of the other. That is, if you're playing the original Dark Souls 2. Fighting both at once sucks ass because they hit like a truck, and it's hard to discern which one is which because they look exactly the same. They also have the ability to heal themselves slowly and degrade your weapons much faster. That's what I needed, my weapons to break faster than normal. Dark Souls 2's weapon durability is already terrible enough, so I have more reason to hate it. But the worst part about this whole encounter is the area preceding this one, the Frigid Outskirts, aka Reindeer Fuckland, because traveling through this area, you get attacked by the most obnoxious and bullshit enemies in this series, reindeer that shoot lightning. They're not fun to fight, and you'll encounter at least 3 of them trying to get back to this fight. Whenever I replay Dark Souls 2, I never bother fighting these guys. Thank God they're optional. The Lois Greatsword is a fun weapon to use if you do beat them, but it's not worth going through this mess, trust me. Number 89, the Beltre Gargoyles. Another instance of reusing a previous boss encounter, except way worse. The Beltre Gargoyles is just a mess of a fight. You need to kill 6 gargoyles to win, but they come in packs of 2 or 3, and it's so annoying to single them out, so you just have to run around and kite them until you get a good chance to attack. It's a lazy and annoying fight overall. The gargoyles aren't even unique in this fight. They all have the same exact moveset as each other, and you can't even chop off their tails for a cool weapon or anything. It's just one of the many mob fights in Dark Souls 2 that isn't very fun to do. You can get a decent amount of souls for beating them, which is pretty nice for this early in the game, so you can jack up that shitty adaptability stat at least. Number 88, the Ancient Dragon. Holy crap, this fight is absolute poopy farts. Ancient Dragon is another optional boss fight, thankfully, which you do not want to engage. If you do, be prepared for one of the longer fights in the game because this guy's HP is through the roof. He has more HP than the final boss. Double the HP, actually. How do you fuck up a dragon fight this badly? Well, first off, you give him like 4 attacks. He does insane damage, and he has some of the most bullshit hitboxes I've ever seen on a boss. Adaptability ain't saving you from this one. It's a real shame too, because I think this guy looks really cool, and his boss theme is pretty nice too. The only reason you would fight him is to get one of the giant souls to make Vendrick a bit easier to beat. He also drops a petrified dragon bone, but it's not worth it. Just fuck this boss, don't even bother fighting him. He sucks. Number 87, the Capra Demon. Capra Demon? Don't you mean the 2 undead dogs as the real boss fight? This fight is pretty infamous for just how bullshit and unfair it is. You're guaranteed to at least die once here, your first time around. You get ganged up on by 2 dogs, and the arena is so small and you have nowhere to run except up the stairs. If you do get hit by those dogs, the Capra Demon can easily take you out no problem. It's crazy to think that the main concern of this fight are the dogs and the small space, and not the actual boss. Once you kill those dogs, the fight is way more tolerable. Lead them up the stairs and hope the Capra Demon doesn't walk up there with you. Sad part is that the Capra Demon itself is a decent fight outside of this room. The cramped room makes the camera zoom in and out constantly, and it's very easy to lock yourself up in a corner. I don't know if this is true, but the developers made this fight shit on purpose for players who weren't enjoying the game. Well, if that's the case, wouldn't you want to make the fight good just to get them to keep playing and make it more interesting? Number 86, Moonlight Butterfly. I wouldn't say this fight is awful, it's just really slow and boring, especially with melee. This fight consists of watching the butterfly fly back and forth and shooting out projectiles you need to avoid. After like a minute or 2, it'll land on the bridge, giving you the chance to attack it with melee weapons. After some time, it'll create an explosion and then fly back up again. You rinse and repeat however many times, and you win. Take my advice and just fight this thing once your weapon does more damage, because you can wipe this thing out in one loop and avoid waiting around to have it land again. I would only recommend fighting this thing if you're doing a divine build, because you can get the divine ember after the fight. Like the Capra Demon, the butterfly resorts to becoming a normal enemy in the crystal caves. The worst fate of any boss is becoming a standard mob. Number 85, the Prowling Magus and his congregation. Speaking of mobs, Prowling Magus and his congregation. Somebody thought it would be wise to make a bunch of normal enemies into a boss. The only threatening enemies in this fight are those 2 priests that shoot out fast projectiles and can heal the other useless morons around them. Once you kill those 2, the fight is practically over. These little hollows aren't threatening, and the main unique enemy, the Magus, is a pushover. His only damaging attack is an up-close explosion, which is easy to avoid. You can even backstab the Magus for a crapload of damage. What boss in Dark Souls can you realistically backstab without consequence? I think maybe Gwyn, but even then you have to parry him, right? You know what the worst part is? You get a Titanite slab for beating this boss. You get the upgrade material needed to fully max out your weapon from a boss that takes 0 effort to beat. That's just ridiculous. Whose idea was this? Number 84, the Ancient Wyvern. This guy could have been cool, but instead of fighting it head on, you need to run around an area avoiding snake men and projectiles from the wyvern instead. I'll admit, the first time around it's pretty cool, but after that, it's just kinda sad. The biggest threat in this whole fight is that one snake man at the end with the chain axe. That guy is a bitch and can hit you from like 5 miles away. The way you beat the wyvern is by performing a plunging attack onto its head at the end of the path, and it dies in one hit. That's less than the Bed of Chaos. No wonder why you see a ton of these guys dead all over the game. They suck ass. There is one encounter with another wyvern later in the area, but it's not very good, and the dragon on the bridge after the Taurus Demon in the first game was more fun than that one. At least this fight is made up for with the Nameless King, which is a great boss, but we'll get to him later. Number 83, the Royal Rat Authority. This fight you just need to be lucky. At the start of this fight there are 4 rats which are more of a threat than the actual boss because they inflict toxic damage, and unlike Dark Souls 1 and Dark Souls 3, you cannot cure toxic damage, so if you get afflicted with it, you're basically dead. So, make sure you bring a strong bow and arrows into the fight so you can one-shot them before they reach you. Luckily, the giant rat that makes all of the rules doesn't attack you until you attack the smaller rats first. The big rat is an okay fight, I suppose. He has this really annoying head charge, which is tough to avoid, and he can puke, which is just gross. He's only hard if the smaller rats are still alive, because most of his attacks can be avoided by just standing under him. I do like the battle theme at least, it's pretty cool. Number 82, Covetous Demon. The Covetous Demon has some really stupid lore that I want to read to you. He had a crush on Queen Mytha, who we'll see later in the list, but she didn't love him back. So he expressed his desire by excessively eating a bunch of food, and somehow his gluttony turned him into Jabba the Hutt. In a way, it reminds me of King Allant from Demon Souls, where his true form is just a blobby thingy, but at least Allant had a cool fight beforehand. Covetous Demon just flops around missing pretty much every attack while you kill it in like 20 seconds. He does decent damage if you do get hit by him, but it's very unlikely you'll actually die because his combo game is crap unless he rolls over and flops around. The Covetous Demon does have some interesting features. If you shoot the jars on the ceiling, hollows will drop out of it and the demon will actually go and eat them. He also has an attack where he can eat you up and strip you of your armor, so you have to run around and pick it up. It's a pretty cool gimmick, and honestly, the fight should have started with that. I would have ranked him higher. Number 81, the Dragon Rider. Well, here's the single and ready to mingle Dragon Rider. The first boss most people might encounter in Dark Souls 2, and he's okay for a first boss, and definitely not as a mid-game boss. The real challenge of this fight is not to fall off the side if you didn't raise the platforms by pulling the levers on the outside. Although most players might do the cheese strat of luring the Dragon Rider to the entrance and have him throw himself into the water below, killing him instantly. I don't do that because I'm really bad at doing it, so I just fight him normally. Dragon Rider has no interesting attacks or gimmicks, so there isn't much to say. He'll swing once, or maybe twice, or maybe do a stab. It's very exciting. I didn't say it before, but his boss theme is probably the only good thing about him. Number 80, Pinwheel. Everyone's favorite easy punching bag of a boss. We all know Pinwheel's story. He was meant to be fought much earlier in the game. But even when you're supposed to fight him, he's still a total cakewalk and dies in a few hits. I don't know why anyone would attempt to fight Pinwheel early anyway, because going through the catacombs at a low level is a complete nightmare and you'll get lost and die. So fuck that and just wait until after you beat Ornstein and Smo, because you're just going to have to go down there anyway to fight Nito later. Pinwheel does actually have an interesting moveset which you'll probably never see fully. The main threat would be his multiple copies shooting a barrage of fireballs to kill you quickly. Oh, the irony. I guess if you want the full Pinwheel experience, fight him with an unupgraded dagger or something. If you want the true experience, kill him with a fully upgraded weapon. At least the masks he drops are cool. Number 79, Scorpioness Najka. I honestly have nothing interesting to say about Najka. This might be the most nothing boss in the series. It's not awful like Bed of Chaos. Hell, it's not even good enough to be mediocre like the Ceaseless Discharge. It's a boss you'll go in and kill and not think anything of it, except, wow, they just took Quelaag and turned her into a scorpion. You can chop her tail off and she can bury underground and sneak attack you. That's neat, I guess. The tree with the item on top is more interesting if you can get Najka to knock it down. Number 78, the Guardian Dragon. Another boss that's kind of just there, but at least is more interesting than Najka. You probably fought a weaker version of this boss before fighting the old Dragon Slayer much earlier in the game. He was more annoying there than he is here. Unless you're playing the original Dark Souls 2, because he's actually not there. The Guardian Dragon is just a faster and easier to kill version of the Ancient Dragon. The fight is fine, but it's the aesthetic that makes the fight better than it actually is. You're inside of a giant bird cage, and the dragon actually takes advantage of it by latching onto it to avoid damage and to rain fire down on you, which is pretty cool. Sadly, he's still easy to kill. His boss theme is probably the worst boss theme for any of these bosses in this whole series. Just listen to it yourself, it's just so bad and uninteresting. Number 77, the Rotten. A cool looking boss for sure, but sadly falls behind because he's really easy. The Rotten is a big slow amalgamation of corpses that fights with a cleaver, and the most annoying thing about this fight are the puddles of fire around the room. I think I've died more times accidentally rolling into the fire than I have the Rotten. Won't be the first time a boss arena has killed me more times than the actual boss. Most of the Rotten's attacks are wicked slow and easy to avoid. One cool move is his grab, where he'll just wring you out like a wet towel. Besides that, nothing else noteworthy about him. Well, actually, you can chop his left arm off and get a Pharos Lockstone from it, which is cool, I guess. Apparently, the weird little dude on his shoulder is supposed to be Pharos. Maybe. It's not confirmed. This boss is also great to farm with the bonfire aesthetic because he's just that easy to kill, and you get a crap load of souls from it. Number 76, the Giant Lord. Similar problems I have with the Rotten. A cool looking boss, but really freaking easy. Which is more embarrassing because the Giant Lord is one of the last bosses you fight before reaching Nashandra. He attacks with a big sword which you'll never get hit by because he swings it so slowly, and you'll most likely deal with him stomping you instead. Honestly, those buff giants with the 2 clubs are more dangerous than this guy. Technically, the Giant Lord is the last giant you fight at the beginning of the game, and somehow he's harder to beat than when he was in his prime. Guess revenge really fueled him. Also, like the Rotten, farming the Giant Lord with bonfire aesthetics to get more souls is great here too, because he's just so easy to kill. Although doing it here is a bit more annoying because of that stupid NPC that spawns in and can kill you in one hit. Fuck that guy, I hate that guy. Number 75, Nashandra. What a pathetic excuse for a final boss. Nashandra is the easiest final boss in the entire Souls series, barring True King a lot, because I count the False King as the real final boss. Much like the previous 2 bosses, it looks cool, but is really slow in attacking, and every attack is pretty easy to avoid. The only annoying thing Nashandra does is spawn these orbs that cause curse and slowly drain your health if you get too close. You can break them at least. Also, if you're dumb like me, you might fall off the side of the arena and die instantly. It's amazing how I feel the exact same way about Nashandra that I do for the Rotten and the Giant Lord. Nashandra is just better than the others because she's got that fancy lore to boost her ever so slightly to the top. Also because she's the most dangerous out of the 3. Number 74, Demon of Song. After trudging through that hellhole, Shrine of Amana, I'm kind of disappointed that the boss isn't up to par in being as totally obnoxious as the area around it. Demon of Song is not just some regular frog. It's a weird dead guy wearing the skin of a frog. I wouldn't say that this boss is hard, but I can't deny that I haven't been destroyed by this guy before because he has a bunch of moves that kill you in 1 or 2 hits. His only weak spot is his face, which you can't hit if the frog's mouth is closed. Just wait until it's done attacking and then go in for the kill. Getting comboed by the arm swings really sucks. Number 73, Ceaseless Discharge. Everyone's favorite boss name, Unending Relief of Load. I'm going to call it relief considering this guy is just spouting lava through his pores. One of his sisters gave him a ring to help him not feel pain, but like a Dumbo, he dropped it into the lava, and that ring turned into the Centipede Demon. Poor bastard. Anyways, the fight with Ceaseless is pretty I wouldn't say he's terribly difficult, but he can easily one-shot you if you're not careful. I think he's the most dangerous after you die because he has a really long fire attack which melts your health bar. You can get Ceaseless stuck in a loop where he'll slam his weird tentacle arm on the platform over and over again, giving you essentially free damage. If you really want to cheese this guy, have him follow you to the fog gate where he'll try to jump towards you but will get stuck hanging off the cliff. Then a few hits later, he'll fall into the void below. It's a pretty cool alternative way to fight this guy, especially if you fight him after Quelaag. You can get a hella souls from this. Number 72, Mytha, the Baneful Queen. You know, I don't know what the Covetous Demon saw in Mytha. I mean, her head isn't even attached to her body. The first time entering this fight with no knowledge of Earthen Peak, you're gonna die the first time. The room is full of poison and you'll die from it. Mytha also can be healed by standing in it, so what do? There's a part of the metal windmill you can burn which somehow drains the poison from Mytha's room, leaving it only on the outer parts of the arena. I guess it's neat figuring that out, but who would think to burn a metal windmill to drain poison? Fighting Mytha is just whatever, honestly. Not a bad fight, just very underwhelming. All of her attacks were easy to avoid and very predictable. The grab was cool at least. Number 71, Throne Watcher and Throne Defender. Another fight I really don't care about. I don't hate it, but it's just not for me. I'm not a fan of most duo boss fights because the majority of the time are just running around the room until you get a clear shot because the bosses are just up your ass 90% of the time. I can say that for these two because these Ornstein and Smell wannabes are always inside of each other trying to spam you down with attacks. You would assume that the Defender would be tougher to beat and a bit slower compared to the thinner and more athletic Watcher. But no, they have similar speed and damage. The worst part about this whole fight, in my opinion, is the room you're in. It's just flat. There are no walls or any little stubs on the floor to help single out each enemy. Even the Puzzling Magus fight had those benches to block incoming projectiles. Overall, a pretty mediocre fight that could have been good if they gave a shit. Number 70, Old Iron King. Damn dude, they got Balrog and Dark Souls? I really like the look of the Old Iron King and his boss team is really great too. Unfortunately, his boss fight is not up to snuff with his looks. The space you have to fight this dude in is really small and that stupid fucking hole in the back has killed me more times than the boss. I'm a magnet to that dumb hole. Really, that hole is what makes this fight hard because the Iron King's attacks are really slow and every arm slam lingers for a while, giving you so much time to counterattack him. Just every attack he does leaves him open for serious punishment. The only devastating attack he has is this grounded explosion, which does a lot of damage and knockback, and it is hard to avoid. If you do avoid it, he'll be immobile for a while, giving you even more free hits. I think if they removed the hole, made the platform a bit larger, and made the king faster, this fight could have actually been pretty good. But alas, it'll never happen. Number 69, the Royal Rat Vanguard. Well, compared to the other rat fight, this one is immaculate. This fight just consists of you killing a bunch of rats. Rats that have the ability to petrify you, which will kill you instantly if it builds up too much. Sounds like it'll be a major pain in the ass, but thankfully the rats don't dogpile you unless you're up in their space. Now there's a specific rat you need to kill in order to win. You just need to kill like 10 normal rats before the big boss rat spawns. The only standout thing about him is that he has a mohawk and more health than your basic rat. Even though this fight is just a bunch of basic mobs as a boss, it's kind of fun, especially if you have a big club to squash the rats in one hit. Number 68, High Lord Wolnir. Finally, another Dark Souls 3 boss after a pool of shitty Dark Souls 2 bosses. Now I'm probably like the only person who actually likes the Wolnir fight. I like his design and Wolnir has some pretty interesting moves. But I have to be real with myself because objectively, this fight isn't that great. When you first hit Wolnir, you'll notice how massive his health pool is. Where my first time around, I thought I got to a later boss that I wasn't supposed to fight yet. But no, this is a gimmick fight where you need to break the bracelets on his arms to deal massive damage and send him back down into the abyss below. This can be really easy to do or really annoying because Wolnir has some really weird jank movement with his arms and sometimes his right arm will be like in his deadly fog coming from his ribcage. Wolnir can also spawn skeletons to aid him and can bring out his trademark sword for extra range. I bet most of you didn't even know he had a sword. I got him to pull out his sword in time with the music and it was really sick to be honest. The The fight gets harder the longer you're in it because the ninja skeleton guys will spawn, and they can't be killed unless Wolnir whacks them. But after you break all 3 of his bracelets, he falls back into the abyss, never to be seen again. He does have an alternate death animation if you kill him without breaking all 3 bracelets. Maybe it's better for him to die instead of being dragged into the abyss forever. I kinda wish you got something for killing him normally instead of just breaking his bracelets. Would have been cool. Number 67, Blue Smelter Demon. A boss I do enjoy, but I can't put him any higher for a few reasons. 1, he's a reskin of the normal Smelter Demon. 2nd, he's part of paid DLC, so much like Ludden Zalin, you spend $10 for one of the bosses to be a clone of a base game boss. And 3, getting to this guy sucks ass. Why do all of the optional boss fights in the DLC have like the worst areas you need to run through just to fight them? And when you get there, it's like a below mediocre boss. The normal Smelter Demon is higher on the list, but the main difference between them is that the timing for the blue demon's attacks is a bit more delayed, which fucks with me, and that instead of dealing fire damage, he does magic damage instead. Again, it's an okay boss fight, but it's just really lazy just reusing the Smelter Demon again. Number 66, the Crystal Sage. I actually kind of forgot this boss existed. It's not terrible, but it just doesn't stand out to me. The Crystal Sage fights with hard-hitting spells from afar and a sword if you get too close. After you hit him, he will dive underground and respawn somewhere else. Halfway through the fight, he'll create clones of himself that also shoot projectiles, except these clones will shoot out blue magic projectiles instead of the crystal shots the real one fires. So you've probably dealt with bosses like this from other games. Hit the real one and the clones will vanish. I had an example in my head, but I forgot what boss I wanted to compare it to that wasn't Pinwheel. Maybe I'll remember when I edit this video. It can get hectic with the projectile spam from the clones, but thankfully there are columns to help block shots from any faraway sages. Decent fight, but not super memorable in my opinion. Number 65, Skeleton Lords. I think we're getting into the more interesting multi-boss fights. The Skeleton Lords are 3 bone daddies that all have unique weapons. One has a scythe, one has a spear, and one has a staff that shoots fire. Well, they can all shoot fire eventually, so staff guy isn't super special. Each lord isn't hard to beat, but they have another trick up their sleeves. Each dead lord will cause skeletons to spawn. Depending on which one you kill will determine which ones will spawn. It's either a group of 10 standard skeletons, 5 armored skeletons, or 2 bone wheels. In the original Dark Souls 2, there was originally 3 bone wheels, so the lords were slightly nerfed in Scholar, which I don't think was necessary at all because these guys are pretty easy no matter which version you play. Skeletons are known to be really annoying enemies, but in this fight only, their damage was cut in half and barely scrape your health bar. I guess it was nerfed for balancing, the base damage might have been too high, but I think it could have worked because the arena is pretty large and there's stuff to hide behind to help separate the skeletons. It's not a bad fight, but I think it could have been a bit harder. Even on New Game, it's not that hard. Number 64, the Gank Squad. If you can believe it, 3 NPCs are the most original out of the optional boss fights in the DLC. These guys are just a bunch of grave robbers dressed as Oscar, Havel, and Lucatiel. Now I thought this fight was just going to be crappy like most multi-boss fights, but to be honest, it's not that bad because they actually made it work. Each member has their own movesets and aren't constantly up your ass. The main grave robber is the fastest of the 3, but not as hard-hitting as Varg, the Havel wannabe, who has the most health. As for Sarah, the Lucatiel knockoff, he mainly fights with a bow and tends to stay far away from the main action. You can actually separate these guys because the arena is really well designed for this kind of fight, with a lower portion with a bunch of winding paths. The dumb spinning statues are kind of pointless though and should be removed. Even though this fight isn't super creative, it's decently well done for what it's going for. Think of this as training for the inevitable invaders after Pontiff Sullivan's fight in the 3rd game. It's equally as annoying. Number 63, Taurus Demon. A nice step up from the slow Asylum Demon fight. Taurus Demon is one aggressive bastard and can be pretty rough the first time around. Make sure you deal with those 2 dickhead hollows on top of the tower because they make the fight worse. All that stuff you learn from the Asylum Demon can be used here too, which is pretty neat, like the plunging attack to deal massive damage. You gotta be quick though, because the Taurus Demon can jump scare you by jumping on top of the tower you killed those hollows on. It might honestly be better to fight him on the tower because the bridge is pretty narrow and avoiding attacks can be hard. The Taurus Demon has some pretty funky hitboxes too, and him just jumping backwards can deal damage to you. You can cheese this fight by having the demon jump backwards off the broken side of the bridge. I can never get it to happen. I did it like once on accident. It was pretty funny when it happened, but every other time I tried to do it, I couldn't do it. I don't know what's wrong with me. Number 62, Stray Demon. A nice little secret for when you revisit the Asylum again. This is actually the first boss you see in the game, just right after you leave your jail cell, so finally getting the chance to fight him is really neat. The main difference between each demon is that the Stray version has a catalyst and can create really large and sometimes hard to dodge explosions. It's in your best interest to stay as close to him as you can because getting hit with that long range blast isn't very fun, especially if he follows up with a jump slam. You can get the Stray Demon to get stuck in a loop of doing the butt slam or the short range explosion, which I see as a bit of a downside. Although I can see it as an upside if you decide to fight the Stray Demon right after you finish the Asylum because that's possible to do. You'll do like 30 damage a swing, but an early Titanite slab and 20,000 souls is insane for early game. Number 61, the Duke's Dear Freya. Behold, the giant enemy spider. The Duke's Dear Freya, I think, can be pretty hard if you come into the fight without a torch. Freya always has a posse of spiders throughout the whole fight, and they'll just gang up on you. If you keep a torch burning, they'll be too scared to approach you and never attack you. Freya has a pretty cool design with two heads, meaning you can get attacked from either side. I was a bit worried that a spider this big would be really slow and easy to take advantage of, but thankfully, Freya is pretty quick to move and react. She'll attack with her legs, her palps, and she can even shoot lasers out of her mouth because why not? And she can also spit out webs which can slow you down for a period of time. It's kind of like the armored spider from Demon Souls. It's really annoying when you get hit by it. I don't like it. The downside to this boss, like most Dark Souls 2 bosses, if one head is attacking, you can get free hits on the other head real easily, even though I'm pretty sure that's the intended way to beat her. You can actually hack the heads off too, which is a cool touch. Number 60, Curse Rotted Greatwood. The best way I can describe how this thing attacks is imagine a really fat, stinky guy rolling around in his bed trying to find the remote for his TV. The only way to hurt the Greatwood is to burst his weird sacs across his body. The most obvious one is near his crotch, but there are other hard to see and reach ones on his hands, his ankles, and on his back. The first half of the fight, there are some other enemies that could interrupt you, but they get launched by the Greatwood. The second half of the fight, you fall down into a pit and the Greatwood grows an arm from its stomach. This arm is super annoying, especially when it grabs you. Other attacks the Greatwood has is shaking weird explodey thingies from its branches and creating pools of stink around its body to prevent you from attacking it. My favorite attack is when he stands up and falls on top of you. It'll most likely kill you, but it's entertaining to see. A lot of people don't like this boss, and I can see why. It's a bit irritating to try and pop the sacks, and once you run out of easy ones to break, you gotta hit the stomach arm instead, which doesn't do as much damage. I think this fight is alright. It does the slow large boss formula pretty well, I feel. Definitely better than something like the Rotten or the Giant Lord, at least. Number 59, Dark Sun Gwindel. Everyone's favorite twink Dark Souls waifu, I guess. At least, I hope you guys knew Gwendolyn was a dude. He was raised by Gwyn as a daughter because his connection to the moon was so strong. Getting to fight Gwendolyn was pretty interesting. You either shoot the big booby lady after Ornstein and Smell, or find the seance ring in the catacombs. I just shoot Booba Lady because fuck exploring the catacombs. The fight with Gwendolyn looks neat, but it's pretty repetitive. He has like 3 attacks and you just need to run to the sides to avoid being blasted by them. Unless he does that large magic arrow, which will go through the wall. If you get too close, he'll teleport backwards and you need to run after him again. But killing him is nice because you get access to his funny hat from Dom Hall. It increases your magic damage without killing your defenses like the Dust Crown. Number 58, Seath the Scalas. The build up to this fight is honestly great. You first get to the Duke's archives and encounter Seath in a small room. You can't do anything to him and you're pretty much forced to get killed by him. Dying gets you transported deeper inside the archive, and finding your way out and entering into the crystal caves for the final bout with Seath is really cool. Sadly, fighting Seath is pretty easy. He's immune to damage until you break his crystal in the back of the boss arena, which should be zero issue because the first time entering the fight, you're right next to the thing. I think Ceaseless should have flew in front of the crystal and you had to try and maneuver around him to break it. His weak spot is his crystal stomach, his crystal crotch. It's so easy to just wail away at it and kill him super fast. Ceaseless does fight back with his crystal breath, which can build up curse, which kills you and cuts your health in half, but I don't think I've ever had that happen to me. I've died to him, sure, mainly because of the super strong explosion crystal attack. The real challenge of this fight is trying to get the Moonlight Greatsword by chopping his tail off. He's always spinning in place and it's really hard to reach. Number 57, Deacons of the Deep. More mob fights. I actually do enjoy fighting the Deacons because if you have something like a Greatsword, you can just cleave through them no problem. The Deacons are all bunched together and the main one you should be killing is the one radiating a red glow. Killing him will cause the red thing to go into another Deacon and you keep killing them until the second phase. The Deacons can shoot fire and stab you with their candlesticks. The fat Deacons can body slam you and it's crazy. But halfway through the fight, the Archdeacon will spawn guarded by a bunch of fat blue Deacons that have more health and can heal the other Deacons. The Archdeacon is your main target now, but the other Deacons aren't going to let you get there so easily. Well, it's still pretty easy to get to him, but you don't want to take too long because the other normal Deacons are casting a spell that will coat the room in darkness, causing curse buildup to kill you in one hit. It's happened to me multiple times, and it's really annoying. Decently enjoyable fight. At least there's something interesting to happen partway through and not just some lazy reskin with a mohawk. Number 56, Vendrick. Poor Vendrick, just an old mindless hollow now. Similar to the Ancient Dragon, but not as terrible, Vendrick is an optional fight which you should engage in. Killing him grants you a ton of souls and you get access to a secret door in the Shrine of Amana, which gives you Vendrick's armor and his boss soul. Before fighting Vendrick, it's pretty much required that you collect giant souls beforehand because his defense goes down drastically if you have all 5 of them. They're not super hard to get, the Black Gulch one is hard to find and that one from the Ancient Dragon sucks. But after getting all 5, Vendrick is killable now. His moveset isn't too in-depth with mostly overhead swings and horizontal slashes. He makes up his limited moveset by having really high damage which can one-shot you in most cases. Vendrick does have one weakness, that being if you dodge to the left you can avoid most of his attacks. I didn't know that, so I got super fucked every time my first time around. It's an alright fight and a good reward after getting all those giant souls. Number 55, The Last Giant. Hey, I remember you. You were on the list earlier as your younger self. Strangely enough, this fight I would consider harder than the late game version. How do you even fuck that up? He's still not super hard, but then again, he's like one of the first bosses you fight. In some way, he's like the Greatwood attacking you with stomps and arm swings. He even has an attack where he'll fall on top of you, which will most likely kill you. Halfway through the fight, he'll rip his arm off for more range. It's kind of like Amygdala from Bloodborne. It doesn't help him too much because the best strat is just stabbing his feet, and the extra range doesn't help with that. I still enjoy this fight. His damage is satisfactory for this early in the game. It's certainly better than the Dragon Rider. Number 54, Gaping Dragon. What a sick looking boss. Gaping Dragon has one of the best designs in the series in my opinion. His fight is also not too bad. He's not super quick or anything, but he is one beefy boy and having super high HP really early on. His damage is super high too, especially with his walking attack which just flat out kills you most of the time. He also has a grab that messes up your vision for a short while, which I think is unique to this fight. I don't remember any other boss messing with your vision. He can also puke a lot, and it covers the whole arena pretty much. It's also gross, like the rat puke. This fight can be a kick in the balls if you didn't explore the area, because high above the arena is a channeler who will heal and buff the dragon when his health gets low. So make sure you kick that six-eyed freak's ass before coming in here. Hitting his tiny head does the most damage and it flops around every time you whack it, which is always funny to see. I just love hitting the dragon's little tiny head. Also, if you chop his tail off, you get a pretty strong weapon, which I never use, but it's cool. Number 53, the Iron Golem. Alright, I know the Iron Golem isn't a good fight, but I just really love knocking this guy off the platform and watching him tumble to his death. You wouldn't think such a big dumb guy would stumble so easily. Also, before you enter this fight, kill the giant above the fog gate because he'll throw cannonballs into the arena, and it's just stupid, and I hate him. It's stupid and dumb. Just kill his dumbass. Even if you don't knock the Golem down, his fight is still pretty fun, and he can throw you down the side of the platform if you're lined up in a bad spot. Again, this is another boss fight that most people would probably consider pretty bad, but I just get so much enjoyment knocking this dude off the cliff. I also really like the Iron Golem axe you get from his soul. It's fun to shoot that windy projectile. Number 52, Demon Fire Sage. You know, by this point you might think I'm not a fan of lazily reskinned bosses unless they're done well. I can't say that Demon Fire Sage, a reskin of the Stray Demon, is done well, but I think he's not too bad. I do enjoy fighting the Fire Sage, which might be weird to hear because I don't think anyone really likes fighting this guy or just likes this guy in general. Compared to the Stray Demon, he's much faster and way more aggressive, which is nice because the area is much bigger than the small cell that you had in the Undead Asylum. I might be the only person to give the Fire Sage a chance at being not terrible. I just thought he was fun to fight. Him being a reskin doesn't help his cause, sadly, and the dumbest thing about Fire Sage is that he's weak to fire damage. That doesn't even make sense. Number 51, Centipede Demon. Another boss with a cool fucking design, which in my books ranks him higher on the list. His moves are also pretty cool too, with his stretchy arm and his insane backflip slams. He can jump and create explosions at his feet and shoot fireballs from afar. If you chop his arm off, that arm actually has a mind of its own and can attack you. It's not dangerous, but it is distracting. Overall, this guy has an amazing moveset and fighting him is super fun. Is what I would say, but there's one major problem with this fight. The arena you fight the Centipede in is fucking terrible. The only good spot to fight him is to run to the right side and fight him on that large empty space. Stepping in the lava will kill you so quickly, and the ring you need to actually traverse the lava you can only get by killing the Centipede. Either give me the ring before the fight, or don't coat the whole floor in lava. They really ruined a good boss with just such a stupid arena. Number 50, the Flexile Sentry. Another twin-headed boss fight, and this one is yet another really cool designed boss. How many times have I said cool in this whole video? Each side of the Flexile Sentry has their own unique moveset, one side using spiked clubs and the other using two curved swords. This guy goes against the norm of roll behind the wind because the other side will just smack you silly. Every time I fight the Sentry, I try to focus more on the club side because it's a bit slower and easier to dodge, until they do their Beyblade spin move and it just kills me. It's also important to kill them quickly because the water inside of the room will rise up, slowing you down and making dodging harder. Sure, it is artificially increasing the difficulty of the boss, but it's excusable here because it's a gradual change and not something obnoxious like a hold to kill you instantly. Isn't that right, old Iron King? You're also in a dilapidated ship, so having it filled with water makes sense. At least you don't drown in it. Also, his boss theme is not too bad. I just want to bring this up because you'll never hear it because you'll just hear the sloshing of water the whole fight. Number 49, Alia, Scholar of the First Sin. Well, certainly better than Nashandra, but still not perfect. Alia is the exclusive true final boss in the Scholar edition of Dark Souls 2. He'll only appear after you beat Nashandra if you find him in all 3 locations throughout the latter half of the game, which isn't too hard to find. He spawns from obvious and useful bonfires. Alia fights with fireballs and slamming his tentacle arms into the ground and shooting them up from it. It's a spectacle for sure, and he works on Smelter Demon and Greatwood logic. He's not a very mobile boss and will just stay in a single spot until he teleports again, so he coats his whole body in fire to help keep you away from attacking him. You'll get brief moments to hit him, but it isn't long moments like some other bosses. Really, my only issue with Alia is that he isn't super tough. If you want a tough challenge, fight the Throne Watcher and Defender, Nashandra, and Alia all in a row. Beating each one causes the other one to spawn, so think of all 3 fights as the final boss gauntlet. Even though I still think all 3 of them are much easier than something like Soul of Cinder, which is pretty sad. Number 48, Halflight, Spear of the Church. Oh my god, it's my arch nemesis, XX_PussyAnnihilator69_XX. But let's make haste and get to the fight. Halflight is unique in that the boss fight could be against another player that invaded your game. Before that though, you gotta listen to Tall Man Judicator Argo and fight a single Painted Guardian. After killing the Painted Guardian, Halflight will spawn in either as an NPC or an actual player. Real players will differ. They'll either be an annoying douche prick and spam magic spells and have some of the worst lag in existence, or they'll be total chads and fight with big slow clubs. Invaders will also get access to some extra spells, I believe, unless it's just the old monk from Demon Souls, I don't remember. The NPC version is not bad actually. He's got a really cool weapon and the magic spells are nice to look at and very strong. They're easy to avoid, but still. One thing I don't like is that another Painted Guardian will spawn halfway through and can heal the boss. I mean, I get it, the invader can't technically heal with Estus, so it's fair. I'm pretty sure they can't heal with Estus, but goddamn that Guardian is annoying. One time an invader let me kill the Guardians just so it's fair. Every other time I just got spammed with magic and the point down emotes. Yeah, you point down PvP players sure are cool. Take a shower, dickhead, you stink. Sorry, I hate PvP sometimes, it just pisses me off. Number 47, Yorm the Giant. You might be surprised to see Yorm up this high, and I'm sort of surprised too. The more I think about it and play it, I actually really like the Yorm fight. The major issue most people have with Yorm is that it's just another easy gimmick boss fight. He's one of the main bosses, so seeing a gimmick on a boss like this is just a bit off. Yorm has a ton of health, the most health of any boss in the series, beating out Ancient Dragon by almost 10,000 hit points. You can do a bit more damage to Yorm by hitting his arms or head when he swings low to the ground, but this isn't the way to fight him. See, you're supposed to grab the Storm Ruler at his throne and fight him with that. If you've played Demon Souls, you know exactly what this does. It shoots a giant airwave that deals massive damage to Yorm, although in Dark Souls 3 it needs to be charged to use it. So the only challenge is to avoid getting attacked while charging the sword. It's not hard, but my favorite thing to do for this fight is have Sigurd fight alongside me. He'll help you during the fight if you complete his side quest, and it's bittersweet for his story. Now if you want to fight Yorm without the Storm Ruler, aim for the arms and head. You can stagger him that way for riposte. I like to fight Yorm without the Storm Ruler, but his small selection of attacks makes the fight really stale. Number 46, Asylum Demon. Come on, the Asylum Demon has to be this high up on the list. He's just so iconic. He's the first boss you fight in the whole Dark Souls series. Of course, looking back now as a veteran player, Asylum Demon is no threat at all. But that very first time though, him dropping in from the sky and the only thing you had to fight him with was a broken sword hilt, it was crazy. After you find the side room and get all of the gear you need to properly fight him, it's on, man. It's on. You get to put what you learned in the tutorial to the test and kick his big fat ass and escape from the asylum. A cool feature about the Asylum Demon is that if you kill him without going down the side path first, you can get the Demon's Hammer as a weapon. It's a nice reward if you decide to fight him with just the sword hilt or your fists. Or if you just beat the game and started the game on New Game with a fully upgraded weapon and kill him in like 5 hits. Number 45, Old Dragon Slayer. Okay, so they took Ornstein from Dark Souls 1 and made him a solo boss. Why? I don't know, but he's a decent fight. He has a lot of the same moves you've grown to love or hate, except instead of shooting lightning, he now has dark magic and incorporated the giant Ornstein butt slam into his move pool. Although early on, getting to this guy sucks because of that stupid dragon guarding the door and every enemy in the area following you down, especially the fucking Hide Knights who can go drown in the water below. I hate the Hide Knights, they can fuck off. So if I die to the Dragon Slayer, it's a pain to get back to him. If it wasn't for an annoying run-up and that they just copied Ornstein, I would have just ranked him much higher because I do like the fight. Originality just was not in the room when this fight was conceived. Number 44, Crossbreed Priscilla. Here she is, the real waifu boss of the Souls series. None of that Gwindel shit. Priscilla is the better Dark Souls 1 waifu. Wait, since when do I care about Souls waifus? Anyways, Priscilla is an optional fight and won't attack you until you attack her. She says to leave her be and the kind inhabitants of this world alone. Kind? I don't think exploding toxic sackmen, weird man birds, dead giant dragons, and bone wheels are what I call kind. Attacking Priscilla will cause her to vanish, and she can attack you while invisible. She does wicked damage and bleed damage with her scythe, and she can also blow you. Well, not in the way you're thinking, but blow this magic dust to deal a lot of damage. Even though she's invisible, you can see her footprints in the snow. Hitting her in the back will reveal her again, and the fight is much easier. Sometimes I just get unlucky and never reveal her and get dicked on the whole battle. You could chop her tail off for a small dagger. I never use it, but it has really strong bleed buildup. It's a cool fight. Number 43, Velstadt, the Royal Aegis. Oh, we finally got to the homie, the Chad, Velstadt. You just can't hate this guy. This guy stood beside Vendrick for years, not moving and protecting his former king. Even after Vendrick became hollow and Velstadt absorbed too much dark energy into his body. Fighting Velstadt isn't super hard, but he hits pretty hard, especially during his second phase where he buffs his damage and defenses. Those dark magic balls, man, deadly. Although it is pretty dumb, you can just deal a bunch of damage to him while he's charging up. He takes less damage, but you can still deal a good amount in that time, almost skipping the second phase. I think my favorite aspect about this fight is that every time Velstadt slams his hammer on the ground, the bell would chime. Imagine my face when I got the weapon myself and it didn't make that noise. Sadness indeed. It's still a fun fight overall. Number 42, Old Demon King. I don't know about you guys, but I always thought the fight with the Old Demon King was pretty fun. I feel bad for him though, because he's in such a bad and out of the way spot in the game. I wouldn't be surprised if most players didn't know where the fuck this guy is. You gotta climb down the broken bridge before the fight with Wolnir and traverse the most bland and uninteresting area in Dark Souls 3. You thought Lost Isolith sucked? Smoldering Lake has something to say about that. Fuck those stupid worms. But I digress. Old Demon King fights like an old fire version of the Taurus Demon. Beefy hits with the side of casting meteor showers, that sneeze fire attack, and rings of fire to surround himself. That fire can be pretty annoying because it travels so far. The arena is good enough to block most incoming attacks, but man is it gruesome. There's just corpses of stray, Taurus, and Capra demons all over the place. I think the saddest part is that when the Demon King is on really low health, he'll perform one final explosion attack to try and end you. If he doesn't, he's left immobile for the rest of the fight, unable to even swat you away. A sad fate for the demons. They got shafted pretty hard in this game. Even in the first game they got shafted. Man, the demons never get good treatment in any of these games, really. Number 41, Ava, the King's Pet. Or Ava, I don't know. Here we go, the better giant cat boss fight that doesn't involve going through some blizzard hellhole dealing with dumbass reindeer. Judging by the distance between Ava and Ludden-Zallen, this fight I hold in much higher regard. A singles fight is just much better in my opinion, and the lack of reindeer sure help. If you enter this boss without exploring Alum Lois first, Ava will be invisible until you pick up the eye at the end of the area. Ava has the same moves as the other two cats with jump swipes and bites. She can also shoot magic projectiles. Some differences between the two is that Ava has a bit more lunging attacks and cannot heal during the second phase, which is totally fine, and she also doesn't kill my durability like Ludden-Zallen. There is a bit of that Dark Souls 2 artificial arena difficulty because there's a blizzard during the fight which can obscure some attacks. Again, I don't mind it because it fits in with the fight. I think I'm at that point where I'm starting to run out of other interesting things to say for some bosses. And I still have like 40 left, Jesus Christ. Number 40, Lost Sinner. Before entering this fight, I always make sure to light the tunnels on the side so there's light during the fight. No light means less visibility, and I can't lock on to the Sinner. Lost Sinner is the best out of the 4 Lord Soul fights in the game, only because it's the only one I would consider remotely challenging. Iron King and Rotten were a joke, and Freya could have been a bit better. Lost Sinner will most likely be the first one you fight out of the 4, and she is tough early on. She moves really quick and has some really hard to dodge attacks. Even harder because your adaptability stat is probably also still really low at this point. That one attack where she jumps behind you for a backstab is nuts. You know what's also really nuts? The new game version of this fight. I haven't said this for any boss in Dark Souls 2, only because I usually never play on New Game. The boss fights have some extra stuff in them to make them even harder. Lost Sinner gets 2 red phantoms in the New Game version of this fight. It makes the fight super fucking annoying, and I don't know who thought it would be fun to do that. The base fight is good, just don't even bother with the New Game version. That just sucks. Number 39, Vort of the Boreal Valley. The second boss of Dark Souls 3, and holy hell, this guy can move. This guy will teach you that Dark Souls 3 is going to be much quicker and tougher than the previous 2 games. Vort attacks with a lot of jumping overhead swings and vertical swings. It's best to roll into him during his attacks because Vort has a problem that most large 4-legged bosses have, standing under him to avoid every attack. At least until the second phase where he powers up and starts sprinting across the room. He can also inflict the newest status effect in Dark Souls 3, Freeze. All it does is slow down your stamina recharge. I rarely see any enemy in the game with this ability, except in like the DLC. Vort was such a good second fight the first few go-arounds. Once you learn about hiding under his body, the fight gets a bit trivial at that point. If he was just a bit lower to the ground, maybe I could bump him up on the list. Number 38, Executioner's Chariot. Now this is a gimmick fight I really enjoy. The chariot doesn't start off like your typical fight. Instead, it's running around a circular room and driving by each time to try and kill you. You need to make your way to the end and pull the lever to shut the gate to prevent him from running around. Getting there is a bit tricky because of the skeletons and the inevitable chariot swinging by to run you over. There are alcoves to hide in, some of them even having necromancers which can revive the skeletons, so kill them when you see them. Reaching the end and pulling the lever down will cause the gate to close and have the chariot crash through and be destroyed. All that's left to do is fight the 2-headed horse and not the guy on the chariot itself. This is where the fight kind of lost me. The horse is cool, sure, but he's really easy to beat and his attacks are really easy to avoid. There's actually an alternate way to fight the chariot. It takes longer, but if you shoot arrows at the horse enough times, it'll actually get stuck in the pit beyond the gate so you can push him down below. Dark Souls 2 bosses always have these cool little Easter eggs you'll most likely never see. It's a shame. Number 37, Bell Gargoyles. The first roadblock in most players' first time run of Dark Souls. The first 2 fights were large and mostly slow-moving demons. Now we have to fight a fast-moving gargoyle? 2 of them to be more accurate, because that second one must have surprised most people and probably weren't prepared for it. I certainly wasn't. I already spoke about the Beltre Gargoyles from Dark Souls 2 way earlier in the video, and this is that fight they were trying to mimic. Except they failed. Their problem was that they just threw too many at once at you. Here you only start off with the one, and then after dealing enough damage, a second weaker version will drop down. Same moves, but half the health and no tail. Oh, I can't forget to mention the gargoyle tail weapon. Chop that thing off because it's a lifesaver. You'll avoid so much unnecessary damage and you'll get a cool weapon out of it. And this weapon I actually used. Now the video I'm showing you, I pretty much destroyed these guys with the club, but let me tell you, the first time around I died a handful of times. That long range from their halberds and their fire breath was deadly. Really great fight, and the first boss to let you know, this is Dark Souls. That was the stupidest fucking line in this whole video, I think. Number 36, Dragon Slayer Armor. Did somebody say Shield Bash? Dragon Slayer Armor is one of the more underrated fights in the game. This guy is a pretty well done fight for what it's worth. He just gets overshadowed by guys like Champion Gundyr and the Twin Princes. I believe the reason being that there's nothing totally stand out with this guy. His moveset is pretty standard for a big hollow set of reanimated armor. His only gimmick is that his axe is all electrical and stuff. In a way, he feels like a mini-boss. Not to say that's bad or anything. I'd rather have a boss with a solid moveset than one with a bunch of bullshit attacks that are annoying to deal with. Dragon Slayer Armor does have one feature that's pretty annoying. There are giant butterflies out of range that can shoot projectiles down on the bridge, which could get you killed. That's really the only blemish of this fight. Remove them and this fight would be much better. The armor does reappear in the DLC as a mini-boss, so at least that's accurate. Number 35, the Ruined Sentinels. Oh my god. These guys were the worst my first playthrough of Dark Souls 2. I fucking hated these guys. I thought it was the most unfair and bullshit boss. I kept getting hit even though I clearly rolled out of the way, and fighting 3 at once was just too much to handle. I actually rage quit during this boss fight. I had a dark side Phil moment. But unlike that piece of human waste, I tried again and learned more about Dark Souls 2. Dark Souls 2 was the last one in the series I played and knew nothing about the adaptability stat, which affected my invincibility frames. I still think the whole stat is dumb, but at least knowing that, I leveled that up and I was able to avoid most attacks. You also don't need to deal with all sentinels at once. When you enter the arena, you drop down on a small platform with one of them. It's the only one to attack you until you either kill it or fall down. I just kept jumping down each time, which was a huge mistake. If you can, kill the first one on that platform, or at least get it really low, the other two will then chase after you. But it's better to fight them below, and it's not terrible. You usually have enough time in between each attack to take advantage and get some good hits in. One of the sentinels also makes it easier because they throw their shield at you, so now you don't have to worry about it blocking damage, and you can turn between both of them. Overall, the more I fight these guys, the more I like the fight. It's one of the harder to master fights in the game, and I can appreciate it for that. But I will never forget the pain I had my first time around. Also, their boss music is probably the best in the game. Number 34, Osiris, the Consumed King. Ah, you ignorant slaves. Finally you've taken notice, have you? I love Osiris' voice, it's so cool. The same voice actor also did Vendrick's voice too, which is equally as badass, so I'm ranking him higher because of that. Osiris' fight is also pretty fun too. It's a little jank sometimes, but a pretty good challenge for this far into the game. Phase 1 just has Osiris walk around slowly swinging his staff and occasionally doing some grounded magic. His first phase isn't that amazing, but it won't take long until his next phase starts, and this is where it gets a bit better. He goes completely feral and starts charging into you and breathing crystal breath, which, much like Seath, can cause curse buildup to kill you instantly. He might be a bit too crazy during the second phase because he'll end up attacking into walls and stay there for a majority of the fight, at least in my experience. He also doesn't have the giant four-legged boss problem I mentioned before, where if you stand under him you can avoid most attacks. Osiris is way too fast and thin to even try something like that. The tail whip he does also surrounds his whole body, so it's hard to avoid it close up. It's a fun fight overall, just maybe a bit too extreme on the movement. Number 33, Chaos Witch Quelaag. Another boss people would consider a waifu, but there's a giant gross spider attached to it, so it doesn't really work for me. We're invading her domain to ring a funny bell, but Quelaag is just protecting her sister down below. Too bad. Quelaag fights with a sword of her own and her giant spider body. The spider slams the ground, creating little explosions, and can also barf up lava that stays on the ground for a long time. The amount of times I backed up into the lava and got killed because of it is too many times to keep track of. The best way to handle Quelaag is to be up close and personal because her sword swipes are easy to dodge if you roll into her. Although don't get too close because you might get stuck in her legs during the explosion attack and you could die. May or may not have happened to me at least once, or twice, maybe 3 times. An enjoyable fight, and I get a kick out of Quelaag's sword whenever I use it. Another cool thing about Quelaag is that you can fight her right after the Asylum Demon if you chose the Master Key as your starting item. She's pretty hard to fight early on because you'll do no damage, and you have to go through part of Blighttown just to reach her. But hey, 20,000 souls and the chance to skip most of Blighttown and the depths seems pretty nice for returning players. Number 32, Aldrich, Devourer of Gods. Oh look, Gwindel is back, except now he's part of a giant blobby mess of corpses inside of Aldrich. With Aldrich, they just took the Crystal Sage fight from earlier, removing the cloning attack, and made the fight just way more enjoyable in my opinion. Like the Sage, the real challenge is to avoid the onslaught of projectiles while you're running towards Aldrich. The rain of arrows mixed with the magic arrow just kills you if you're unlucky. And you will be unlucky because the projectile spam is way more wicked than you might expect because Aldrich also has these little tiny specks of magic that fly towards you and linger in the air for a long time. Also, coating the ground in fire, like Alia, is also a bit irritating. My favorite aspect of the fight is just the music. It's a twisted version of Gwendolyn's theme from the first game and it sounds really cool. The mix of projectile spam and Aldrich's weird body, which is a bit hard to hit sometimes, might turn some people off, but I always liked reaching Aldrich and kicking his slug butt. Number 31, Eudix Gundyr. Now this is what you call a boss. No less than 10 minutes into the game, you're faced with one of the hardest first game bosses, Eudix Gundyr. Here to tell you that Dark Souls 3 is not as slow or methodical as their previous 2 games, and is here to whoop your ass into shape. And that's the key to win against Gundyr, be aggressive back. If you're too passive with this guy, he'll mop the floor with you. No pussyfooting with this guy. That's a word, and not something dirty. Just Google it yourself, I promise. You can even practice your parrying skills, because you can do that with this guy and do a riposte. Another thing they'll make prominent is multiple phases. Previous games had extra phases for certain bosses, but in Dark Souls 3, pretty much every boss has a definitive second phase. Here, Udix will transform into a giant black moldy snake creature. Nowadays, when this phase happens, I try to spam him down because holy crap, this phase has some range and damage. It's also pretty hard to tell what the hell is going on because he's so big. Fantastic start for Dark Souls 3, and this won't be the only time we'll see Gundyr. Number 30, the Pursuer. Pursuer will make you think you're good at parrying in Dark Souls 2, when in reality, the parry in Dark Souls 2 is funky and you'll suck at it no matter what. Cool thing about the first encounter with the Pursuer is that you can fight him outside of the main boss arena, and if you kill him there, you won't fight him on top of the castle wall. I always thought the castle wall was better because you can use those ballistas to wipe out over half of his health. I've fought this dude so many times that I can fight him without taking damage sometimes. I know, I'm a god at gaming. No, you know why his name is the Pursuer? It's because throughout certain points in the game, more on New Game Plus, the Pursuer will actually spawn in and attack you. Like that one instance in the throne room in Drangleic Castle where 2 of them attack you at once. Man, that shit was crazy. One of the reasons why he's so high up is because he's just a looming threat. You don't know when or where he'll spawn, unless you played the game before, but it catches you off guard each time. Apparently the Pursuer was supposed to spawn in more often than he does, but it was cut for some reason. I would look up a reason, but I'm too lazy. Number 29, Sanctuary Guardian. See, I can believe that this guy is warranted as a guardian of something sacred, unlike, say, the Guardian Dragon. Main reason being that the Sanctuary Guardian is actually scary and hard to fight. For Dark Souls 1 standards, the Guardian is really fast. He attacks multiple times in a row and can quickly fly around and rain lightning bolts down upon you. He also has that scorpion tail which can poison you, but I always chop it off. You get a weapon for it, but I'm not using that crap. Who the fuck uses whips in Dark Souls? As the first fight in the DLC, he does a pretty solid job introducing the challenge that awaits you. Even after you beat him, you can go back into his arena and fight 2 more of them. Would you want to? I don't know, it's up to you I guess. It's a solid fight, just overshadowed by the other bosses in the DLC. Number 28, Gravelord Nito. The OG skeleton boss fight. Another fight where I think the atmosphere is probably the best aspect. After traveling your way through the Tomb of the Giants, dealing with those weird dog skeletons, Pinwheel clones, and everyone's favorite dickhead, Patches, we drop down into Nito's tomb. The dark caves, the music, the army of skeletons, and Nito himself are freaking sick. But how's the fight? Well, much like the Skeleton Lords in Wolnir, be prepared to fight a bunch of normal skeletons and big skeletons alongside the boss. And they're not nerfed like the Skeleton Lords version. They can be killed by yourself, or even Nito, but they'll come back to life unless you kill them with a divine weapon. But who makes a divine build? Come on. Nito is pretty slow, but his strong attacks and army beside him make up for it. Even if you're far away, Nito can slam his sword into the ground, which will appear below you, causing toxic buildup. Luckily, you can cure that, unlike Dark Souls 2. His other dangerous move is his Miasma Blast, which covers a ton of space and will most likely knock out the skeletons. Best chance to attack him is after that move because the skeletons aren't around. Now this fight isn't perfect, of course. It has your typical problems as most mob fights do, that being most of the fight you're killing the enemies. But here you have a giant stalagmite in the way to help separate yourself from the bony bastards. For that, I can't put him much higher. Sorry Nito, it's just mob fights sometimes are a little bit too repetitive. Number 27, Champion's Gravetender and Great Wolf. Another boss you probably wouldn't expect to see this high, but this is another underappreciated boss in my eyes. Champion's Gravetender is just one of the only 2 bosses found in the Ashes of Ariandel DLC. While the fight with Sister Freed makes up for the lack of bosses and is the main highlight, no one gives a crap about the Gravetender. I'll admit, the first half of the fight isn't very interesting. It's just 3 wolf mobs and the Gravetender. The Gravetender is your typical NPC fight, except he has a pretty cool weapon, the Valor Heart. It's more of a PvP weapon than a normal gameplay weapon. If this was the whole fight, it would be bottom tier, but thankfully it's made up for it with Phase 2. The Gravetender will raise his hand in the air, and you'll hear a howl, and the Great Wolf will drop into the fight. The Great Wolf saves this fight from being complete trash because it's really fun to fight. They pretty much took Vort and the Royal Rat Authority and combined it into one, except it's way faster. Cool thing to note about the Great Wolf is that you encounter it outside of the boss arena when you're going through the mountain. If you defeat it there, it'll have less health in the fight. I usually avoid it because the other wolves are pretty annoying. Thank you, Great Wolf, for making a fight that could have been trash into a pretty swell one. Also, that second phase music kicks ass. Oh, also you unlock the Undead Arena after this fight, so yay, I never go into it. Who needs the Undead Arena when you have the back of Pontiff Sullivan's boss room to deal with? Haha, that's even better. Nah, fuck that place. Number 26, Alana, the Squalid Queen. You guys remember Nashandra? Well, she has nothing to do with Alana, even though they look similar. I only bring this up because this fight should have been Nashandra's moveset. Alana doesn't move very fast and will teleport if you get too close. Like a lot of the other bosses in Dark Souls 2, you have a ton of time to beat her up because she'll just stand there and take hits during certain attacks. She'll have small dark magic projectiles and an explosion spell, which is similar to Zelda's side B from Smash Bros. Her most dangerous move is summoning help. Most of the time you'll get 3 gold skeletons, very rarely you'll get 3 small pigs, and the most dangerous one, she can summon Velstadt. Yeah, the homie himself can be brought into the fight. This is the make or break with this encounter. If she summons Velstadt, there's a good chance you can get dicked on and die. In my opinion, I like it when she summons Velstadt because it makes the fight more frantic. It works well here because Velstadt is quick while Alana is dirt slow and focuses more on projectiles. You might hate this fight because of that, but I enjoyed it personally. Number 25, Smelter Demon. Oh, look who it is, the OG Smelter Demon. The blue version, if you remember, I ranked pretty low on the list due to the fact it was a reskinned boss put inside of a $10 DLC with a shitty run-up. Well, the base game version only has one shared trait, besides the moveset, the run-up. Going through the Alon Knights in Iron Keep fucking stinks, and I hate it every time I play. It never gets better. But ignoring that, Smelter Demon is a great boss to fight. I didn't really explain the fight before, but the demon likes to attack with combo swings, sometimes adding an extra swing into the mix to trip you up. Throughout the fight, he'll start changing to make things harder. He'll increase his fire stomach to spread further out, slowly damaging you if you get too close. Then he'll jam his sword into his stomach to engulf it in flames, adding fire damage and range to his overhead sword slam. It's a pretty tough fight, but beating him gains you access to a very convenient bonfire. Also, you can say hi to the pursuer that will spawn into this room if you go back. Smelter Demon is the only good thing about Iron Keep. Number 24, 4 Kings. My favorite thing about this fight is sometimes you can fight 5 kings instead of 4. 4 kings is the last of the 4 lords we need to talk about, and the best of them. Dropping down into the arena the first time around, you'll just die. But once you get the ring from Sif, you can drop down and stand alone in the abyss. Then a few seconds later, the music starts and this weird looking guy flies towards you. Each king has the same move, so I'll go over it here. It's mainly sword swings. The closer you are to the king, the less damage it does. I guess you're getting whacked with the hilt. There's also this projectile they can shoot out which follows you until the day you die. It's kind of annoying. A grab which also follows you for longer than you might expect. And an AoE that happens pretty close and it covers a lot of space, so stand back. The key to win this fight is to take down each king quick. After a minute, I believe, the next king will spawn. So if your weapon does like 50 damage a hit, be prepared to fight multiple kings at a time, and let me tell you, that's a pain in the ass. I still really like the fight. The arena and the music are great. Although depth perception might be a problem because you are fighting in a giant black void. Some attacks might be hard to dodge at that point. Number 23, Lorien and Lothric, the twin princes. Yeah, 1, 2. Princes stand before you. That's what I said now. Princes who absolutely hate you. The final fight before the Soul of Cinder, and they do not hold back. Lothric is a little bitch boy, while Lorien is the muscle of the group. Which is sad because Lorien is blind, a mute, and his legs don't work like they used to. That's not stopping him though, because he's still capable of kicking your ass. Metaphorically speaking, that is. The fight starts with Lorien crawling and teleporting around the room, swinging his sword, and then occasionally shoot out a flame wave. It's pretty tough, but after you knock him down, it gets even harder. Lothric stops being a little weenie and piggybacks on his brother, healing him back up to full, and this is the main target of the fight. Phase 2. Lorien can't be completely killed if Lothric is still alive, so you gotta kill Lothric instead. If he dies, they both die. Lothric is able to spam projectiles as well as enhancing Lorien's powerful sword slams. It can be a bit hard to keep track of everything because they'll teleport around more often. If you do knock Lorien down, you can get a bunch of free hits on Lothric. You gotta be quick though because Lothric will revive Lorien. So in a way, this is similar to the Throne Watcher and Defender fight, but actually not awful. This fight was always really fun to play again, and there was nothing I would consider total bullshit. Maybe the sporadic teleporting might get some people annoyed, but it's manageable. When you see him teleport, you just gotta get out of there. Number 22, Looking Glass Knight. For the rest of this section, I'm calling him the Mirror Knight because I always call him that, and I'm pretty sure you guys do too. Sure, this guy might be another dude in armor, but he's a cool dude in armor. His moveset is what you would expect, a lot of vertical and horizontal swings, but he likes to trick you up by adding extra attacks during later combos, kind of like the Smelter Demon. He can also coat his sword in electricity to provide extra damage or to launch projectiles. The most unique move he has is summoning an NPC out of his shield during the fight. Sometimes it could be an actual player invading like the Halflight fight. Every time I fight the Mirror Knight, however, no one invades. I fought this guy a bunch of times and have not experienced a single invasion. Either I'm unlucky or no one cares about this fight. Regardless, this fight is still really good, and I like the heavy rain and lightning during the fight. It makes it really atmospheric. The only downside I have with this fight is that the area after this is the Shrine of Amana. Dark Souls 2 giving us such a good boss, only to then dump us into one of the most obnoxious areas in the Souls series. Thank you, Dark Souls. Number 21, Great Grey Wolf Sif. I mean, come on, who could hate Sif? It's a giant dog with a sword. It's really cool. Sif is the boss everyone always feels bad for killing, unless you hate dogs. All he was trying to do was defend Artorias' grave from a bunch of thieves like us. The fight with Sif isn't the hardest or complex. Sif has a pretty basic moveset with mainly horizontal slashes and some backflips. Sif makes up for it with high speed and damage. But much like other big four-legged bosses, most attacks can be avoided if you just stand under him. He is pretty big, so you could miss some swings if you have a short-ranged weapon like a dagger, but even then, just hit his feet. The whole fight is just sad. When Sif is at low health, he'll actually start to limp and fall over trying to attack. The Royal Rat Authority also limps at low health too, but, you know, it's a giant gross rat, so who gives a shit. I remember people saying if you just ignore Sif for a while, he'll run away, but that doesn't happen. You have to kill him to progress. Another sad thing that could happen is if you explore the DLC before this fight, you can find Sif trapped in the abyss and you can save him. Going to this fight now will play a different cutscene where Sif will recognize who you are and reluctantly fight you. Nothing but sadness when you fight Sif. Thanks, Miyazaki. Number 20, Ornstein and Smo. We're at the top 20 now. Starting off, we have the encounter which most people consider one of the best fights in the series. And it's a duo boss fight at that, which is crazy. So let's get the obvious stuff out of the way, everyone says. This fight works well because Ornstein is fast and will attack you the most, while Smo is the slower, harder-hitting one, yada yada yada, you've heard it before. Separating them so you don't get dogged on is easier because of that, and the column bases around the room also help spread them apart. This combination makes them stand out and completely destroys any of the lower ranked multi-boss fights that just gang up on you and just unfairly kill you. It could happen here too, but at least you can manage around it and avoid that kind of crap. Unless Ornstein does that weird glitchy dash attack, which is really annoying to dodge. It's weird. Now the cool thing about this fight is after you beat one of them, the other one will absorb their power and grow larger. Giant Smo I would consider easier because you can abuse his AI, but Giant Ornstein is pretty tricky because he attacks way faster and more often. Doesn't hit as hard, but damn I died to Super Ornstein more than Super Smo. It's a really great fight overall. Definitely overrated in the community. I don't think it's amazing or anything, but it's still really fun. Number 19, Black Dragon Calamite. Well, finally, a dragon boss that doesn't suck complete asshole. After talking about the underwhelming Guardian Dragon, the cool yet not amazing Gaping Dragon, and the abomination Ancient Dragon, we reach Calamite. This might be the first time in this whole list where a boss that's a four-legged creature can't be cheesed by standing under it. Maybe I mentioned it before, but I've been making this video for too long, so I don't even remember. Calamite is fast and hard to avoid, especially that head swing, which I always get hit by. His electric breath can also be tough to avoid because it reaches pretty far, although it actually does magic damage and not shock damage, which I wish I knew about the first time I fought him. By far, Calamite's most dangerous and unique attack is the Mark of Calamity. Getting hit by this puts a debuff on you, which makes it so you take double damage for a minute. Hope you're good at dodging, because this debuff sucks. Maybe you want a harder challenge, so you get debuffed on purpose. I don't know, some people like that. In fact, you can get a permanent debuff after beating Calamite because he drops the Calamity Ring. The hardest part of this fight is chopping the tail off. It's not low to the ground like other bosses, and the only good chance to chop it is during the Calamity attack or the stand-up Flame Breath. I can never cut it off, but if you do, you get a really cool sword from it. Really enjoyable fight, and the fact you need to have help from Hawkeye Go, I don't know how to pronounce his name, to bring him down to the ground is sick too. Only upset with this boss for me is the hard to avoid head attacks. Number 18, Dancer of the Boreal Valley. This boss fight always gives me chills, especially that music. There's an elegantness, that's a word, to the way the dancer moves. I guess hence the name Dancer. It's just smooth, and she attacks with a variety of 360 spins. First half of the fight she only has one sword, but will later grab another as she's low on health. The second sword always catches me out of my roll because it's delayed just enough where I'll get whacked by it, and other subsequent attacks. Unlike Vort, who was the dancer's partner in crime, she slowly moves around, circling you until you get close, where Vort just rushed in, frozen mace ablaze. She's pretty similar in style to Pontiff Sullivan, but not as aggressive. Makes sense, considering she's a soldier of his, just like Vort. Dancer is the midway point of the game. You usually fight her after you beat the other lords, but you could fight her much earlier, like the same time you fight Vort. If you just kill that old hag sitting in the chair, you can steal her cereal bowl and start the fight there. You get super early access to the late game areas and a ton of souls, but it's difficult to fight Dancer so early. You could if you wanted to. It's definitely worth it. Number 17, Sin, the Slumbering Dragon. Me ranking Sin higher than Calamite? Someone is going to be upset about that, but I always really like the fight with Sin. To get this out of the way first, make sure you bring repair powder to this fight because this is like the only fight in the game where that might be a major issue. Compared to Calamite, Sin shares a lot of similar traits, mainly grounded attacks with a bunch of claw swipes and head swings. His Fire Breath is unique because it has an added effect of dealing toxic damage. I said earlier in the video with the Royal Rat Authority that you can't cure toxic damage. You can, it's just that the Poison Moss is one item and cures both, which I never knew about until now, because, Dark Souls 1 and 3 had two separate items for that, but whatever Dark Souls 2, you do what you want. But still, toxic damage is like 2 times faster in this game than others, so I don't know, it sucks either way. Toxic damage sucks. One thing Sin likes to do more than Calamite is fly. He flies a whole lot and it is hard to hit. He'll constantly rain down fire to hit you. He can shoot fireballs which create poison clouds that linger for a very long time. The unnecessary toxic damage I received really stunk. Pretty fun fight overall, but damn it Sin, can you stay grounded for more than 5 seconds please? Number 16, Dark Lurker. Another boss I wouldn't be surprised if no one knew how to get to. Dark Lurker is such a cool boss. Too bad you have to do those dumb, stupid Covenant missions, which are one of the most unfun things to go through. All the good base game bosses are just stuck behind dumb shit. Dark Lurker is one hard-hitting bastard with his mix of dark and fire magic, which can deal over half your health. Up close he's still pretty brutal with magic sword swings and an AoE explosion, which really fucking hurts. Halfway through the fight, Dark Lurker makes it even harder because he'll make a copy of himself to add more nonsense into the fight. Yes, it turns into a multi-boss fight, which considering it's this high up, means that it works well enough. Dark Lurker doesn't move around too fast, and usually if he's near you, he'll run up to hit you. It's not like he's far away and he'll just sprint towards you. The other one in the back will just shoot projectiles, which is easy to avoid if you get the camera just right. The projectiles don't move super fast, so it's not that bad, unless it's the magic arrow. Both copies work in tandem with each other, and it isn't completely unfair. The only thing that sucks is dying because you need to run through another gauntlet to reach him again, wasting human effigies and flame butterflies just to go back. What a piece of crap. Number 15, Sir Alon. Like a bunch of other bosses, Sir Alon has one of the worst run-ups to a boss fight in the series. It's not as bad as the other DLC run-ups like the Blue Smelter or the King's Pets, but it's still awful dealing with the Alon Knights and those flame salamanders. Unlike the other optional DLC fights, however, Sir Alon is actually a good fight, so going through the nonsense area before is actually worth it. Sir Alon, similar to a few other bosses, doesn't have a ton of different moves, but makes up for it with high speed. That long-range dash being one of his most dangerous, and he uses it a lot. He's got a stab attack similar to the Pursuer, which will buff his sword for a good minute or so. He also punches those who use his shields by kicking them away, and he can also parry you. Yeah, a boss that can parry you is pretty scary. The Lost Sinner can also parry too, which I totally forgot to mention, and it'll most likely kill you. But can we take the time to appreciate how clean Alon's floor is? All that blood spilling from your body has no effect on the floor. It's amazing. How does he do it? One of the best fights in all of Dark Souls 2, and the music is fantastic. Also, he commits seppuku if you don't take damage during the fight. Most people probably know that by now, so moving on. Number 14, Abyss Watchers. I don't even know what's going on in most of the fight. The Abyss Watchers just swing around wildly, and I just mash the circle button and avoid it the best I can. At the start, you're only fighting one of these guys until the other Watchers start to stand up and fight. So it partially becomes a multi-boss fight, until a third Watcher wakes up and fights alongside you, which is really nice. At least until he kills the weaker one, and then it just comes after you again. My friendships never last long in these games. But the second phase of this fight is where it gets real. All of the dead Watchers all form into one Watcher, and the last one fights you with added fire. Ooh. The fire adding extra damage, range, and lingering flame trails, which are always fun to run into constantly. And you know what? I still don't know what the hell is going on. Just a bunch of spins and flips and sliding and burning and pain and all that. The whole aesthetic is my favorite part, especially the music. I like how the music has a whole choir singing during the first phase, and then goes down to a single voice for the second phase because only one Watcher remains. Cool fight, cool fight. Now I'm really running out of things to say. There's only 13 left, hang in there. Number 13, the Fume Knight. This fucking guy was the boss I got killed the most by. Fume Knight, or to call him by his actual name, Rame, is the main boss of the Crown of the Old Iron King DLC, and damn does he show it. To make this fight easier, it's best to explore the area first to find these Smelter wedges. You can jam them into the statues on the outer ring of the boss room. It's best to at least remove 2 of them on one side because the statues can heal Rame if he gets too close to it. If you can manage to stay in the center of the room, you don't have to worry about it too much, but Rame will make sure to keep you moving with his rapid pace and hard-hitting attacks. He'll fight with 2 swords during phase 1, the smaller quick sword and the iconic fume sword, which is slower and deals a heck of a ton of damage. Kinda hard to dodge sometimes because it reaches out pretty far, and you know, if your adaptability sucks, it's also pretty bad. Phase 2 is where he'll ditch the smaller sword and fight with his big sword only, now coated in fire. Honestly, I think this phase is easier to deal with. Sure, he does way more damage, but most of the attacks are easier to dodge. Except that really slow up-close swing he does, that always fucks with me. You know, if you enter this fight wearing Velstad's armor, Rame will immediately jump into the second phase. It's pretty cool if you know the lore that I will not explain to you. Read it yourself, Mr. Man or Mr. Woman. It's a solid fight. Number 12, Gwyn, Lord of Cinder. Much like Vendrick, throughout the whole game you hear about Gwyn as this powerful god and the former king of Lordran, and you gotta take his place as the next lord, and rekindle the flame. But then at the end of the game, you get to the kiln of the first flame where the whole place is pretty much just ash. You reach the center and fight Gwyn, who doesn't fight as you would expect a powerful lord to fight. There's no fancy cutscene to introduce him, just some somber music which doesn't fit in with the rest of the boss music, but for Gwyn's character as a whole, it's perfect. Gwyn is pretty notorious for being the only boss in the game you can parry. In fact, if you're good at parrying, this final fight should be cake for you. If you were like me the first time playing, you probably sucked at it and were using Smo's hammer to fight. Slow weapons do not work well for this fight because Gwyn moves around quick, and that fucking grab was my kryptonite back then. At least it doesn't drain your soul level like Alant did in Demon Souls. But yeah, there's nothing spectacular about Gwyn's moveset. It's as basic as it can be. For those looking for a super tough final boss, you probably won't find it here. But it makes sense story-wise on why the fight is like this. Honestly, one of the best encounters in the series. Number 11, Burnt Ivory King. Well, here we are, the final Dark Souls 2 boss. Sadly, it couldn't reach the top 10, but Dark Souls 3 has too many insane bosses. But hey, we're ending it off with a great fight. Burnt Ivory King has an interesting fight. First, you drop hundreds of feet down with your own knights. Well, the knights you rescued at least. You're better off exploring the unfrozen Alum Lois to find the other knights because they help a lot during the fight. The first part of the fight involves killing a bunch of charred knights that never seem to focus on your own knights. I'll admit, this part kind of stinks. The main purpose of this is to have your knights enter the portals they spawn from and freeze them, because once the Ivory King spawns, the charred knights will still hang around. After some time, the Ivory King will arrive from the fiery gates of hell, which is the most metal fucking entrance of any boss in the series. And well, like I said like a billion times already, the Ivory King's moveset is pretty basic, but used effectively. Probably balancing reasons because the Charred Knights could make it worse. But yeah, expect a lot of sword combos and dashes. He can also apply a buff to his sword, which almost seems permanent because he uses it all the time. Other moves he can use are an impale like a lawn and a grounded AoE. A lot of bosses have close-up AoEs, don't they? Super cool fight, the whole entrance buffs it up a lot. Number 10, Demon Prince. Now this is a fight to introduce some cool-ass bosses in the final DLC. I don't know how many people will agree with me, but I think the Demon Prince is a fantastic fight. Now let's start with the beginning where you fight two demons, the demon in pain and the demon from below. Oh boy, another multi-boss encounter, but hey, it doesn't suck ass. Both demons have the same moveset, which involve a ton of up-close slashes and ground pounds. While one demon is up your ass, the other one is in the background shooting out trails of toxic gas. It's annoying, but easily avoidable. After some time, or when the active demon does a fiery ground pound, the other demon will become enraged and take over as the lead one. One thing I like about each demon is that they are different colors, so it's easy to determine which one is which. And it's pretty important in this fight because depending on who you kill last changes how the second phase will play out. The last one you killed will then get back up and then turn into the Demon Prince, a bigger and much scarier version of the other two wimps before. All of the same moves still apply with some added flair, and much more fiery slams and fireballs. He also has a special move, which is based on who died last. If the demon from below died last, he'll shoot out lasers. If the demon in pain dies last, he'll shoot out massive fireballs. I think the laser phase is easier, so if you want a tougher fight, kill the pain demon last. They also do the big boss format great here. Hitting the prince's body does less damage, so you need to hit the head to maximize your damage output. I really love how chaotic this fight is, but only at 10 because the toxic damage is dumb. Sorry, Demon Prince. Number 9, Knight Artorias. You know, if his left arm wasn't broken, Artorias might have been way harder. For Dark Souls 1, Artorias is pretty fast, much like the Sanctuary Guardian that came before. Most attacks from him are flying across the room with slides and jump slashes, the most notable one being his full frontal assault summer slams. Full summer slams? This isn't WWE, what the somersault slams? Jeez. He can also throw Abyss Sludge at you, which doesn't do a whole lot of damage, and if you have a good enough poise, it's not a problem. What is a problem is the power-up he can do. It'll take a while for him to get it off, so hopefully you can do enough damage to stagger him out of it. If he powers up, you're boned if he hits you because it can stack up each time he does it. Good thing I always use a strength build because Dex and Magic is for pussies. Gotta be a manly man with big axes to deal a billion damage. Even though the DLC is named after Artorias, he's the second boss you fight during it. Interesting to have the title boss be so early. It's a sign for the horrors that await you beyond the boss room. The horrifying abyss. And that weird spike guy with the chain ball stuck to him. That guy sucked too. Number 8, Soul of Cinder. The best final base game boss of Dark Souls. Gwyn was sad, but understandable. Nashandra was sad because she was fucking easy. What the hell? Soul of Cinder is actually really tough, and a nice send-off for the finale. Soul of Cinder seems like a pretty random boss, all things considered. At least Gwyn and Nashandra were involved with the lore of the world. This guy is just kind of there. Well, he's actually the embodiment of everyone who has linked the flame in the past. Gwyn, your characters from the first two games, and even Soler if you did his plotline. That also factors into his moveset because he has multiple different styles using long swords, magic, curved swords, and even a spear. I hate the spear and any enemy that uses one. It's so obnoxious with multiple hits and stun lock potential. I hate spears. It can be pretty tough to adjust to each style because you can change them on a dime. After a bit, you can get the hang of it, but he's not done there, because Phase 2 happens right after and things will seem familiar. Gwyn's theme will interject during the fight, and the Soul of Cinder will have some of Gwyn's old moves, like the jump slash and that iconic grab. He'll also have a pretty brutal 5-hit combo which locks you in place until he's done. It's kind of similar to Manus. Another thing he'll use are lightning bolts, which are also part of Gwyn's arsenal, even though he didn't use them during the first game's fight. Well, I guess I can keep the flame burning after I beat you. Probably won't amount to much because, well, this is the last Dark Souls. Number 7, Champion Gundyr. Whoa, hold up. A reused and reskinned boss fight this high up? What inconceivable crap is this? I thought you hate reskinned bosses. With my complaints about reused bosses being lazy and just a cheap way to add more bosses into the mix, Champion Gundyr puts those complaints to rest because it's actually very well done here. We're fighting Gundyr in his prime, where he doesn't have a big moldy snake growing from his back. Imagine if we could fight Vendrick and Gwyn in their prime. That would be the tits. But I digress. Champion Gundyr is a pretty well hidden fight behind Osiris' boss room. He does live up to his name of champion because this guy has got the moves. Some moves are of course shared with the Udix version, but there's other classic staples like the damn kick. His kick should be a boss fight all on its own because it's his most dangerous move. It always catches me off guard, and when he combines it with that as launching attack, it really hurts. The second phase, he gets super pissed with some other tough to dodge moves like a charging swing. He incorporates a lot of his body into these attacks now with punches, shoulder tackles, stomps, and that kick of course. He does not let up during the second phase and becomes much harder to avoid and take advantage of. It's hard for me to even heal he's so fast. Like the original Gundyr, he can be parried if you can pull it off. I could, but, he's too fast for my ape brain. This is a fight you just need to play for yourself to experience how fun it is. Although I presume most people watching this already beat this guy like 30 times already. Number 6. Nameless King. The Ares of Dark Souls and the unloved firstborn child of Gwyn. I only briefly mentioned the Nameless King before during the Ancient Wyvern fight because that terrible fight was made up for with this amazing fight. The first half of the fight will have the king ride on his faithful Stormdrake. And now looking at this makes me realize how cool it would have been if the Dragon Rider actually rode on one in the second game instead of, fighting two identical ones in Drangleic. The Stormdrake and the king actually mix their attacks with each other, working together to kill you rather than him just standing there occasionally throwing a lightning bolt at you. The Drake half of the fight is pretty fun, but man, the camera during this part is awful. It zooms in way too much when you're close to the Drake. It's not hard to kill because hitting his head melts his HP. After beating the Drake, the king will pull an Ornstein and Smell and absorb his friend's body into his weapon, making him way stronger. Well, they're friends in this game. I don't think Smell gave a shit when he crushed Ornstein in the first game. In this phase, you can expect the typical moves that most bosses with any bladed weapon is capable of doing. So let's instead mention some of the special attacks, like the king being able to send waves of clouds at your feet to trip you up, or how about flying in the air for a quick ground slash and chucking lightning bolts at your dumb face. The whole fight just looks so cool, and a fight that I always look forward to facing. Number 5. Pontiff Sullivan. Oh looky here, another guy responsible for a lot of my deaths in this game. Sullivan is one fast fucker with 2 swords. Dude has a longer range than you would expect, and he can combo you to death with little effort. This guy is the one guy who punishes all those who like to spam roll away from attacks. He'll let you know that you need to be patient when you roll and not to waste it all on practically nothing. He's a little bit less aggressive in phase 2, but only because he'll spawn a ghost of himself that will attack before him, doing the same move. Sure, it might be easy to dodge the first time, but how about the second time? I like keeping the copy alive just so I can see what move is going to come out next. Also, killing the clone will only last for like 5 seconds because Sullivan will just make another one right after you kill it. Sullivan was truly an unforgettable opponent in Dark Souls 3, especially after the fight, which is the PvP haven for all those in love with that. I just switched to offline mode here because I just want to reach the next part of the game and not deal with 4 invaders at once with 900 ping. Number 4. Manus, Father of the Abyss. The final Dark Souls 1 boss, and how appropriate it is because this is the final boss of the DLC. Out of all the fights in Dark Souls, Manus still gives me trouble. Best way I can describe his movement is that if you're fighting a giant monkey. He hops around a lot and most of his attacks are coming from his super stretchy arm. That 5-hit combo he can perform being one of his most brutal attacks which locks you in place. His scariest attacks are his Dark Orb barrages, either closing in on you or raining from the sky. They are tough to avoid if you time it incorrectly, but if you explored Ulasil and found the silver pendant, you can deflect the attacks. I personally never use it because it takes a while for me to switch to it with other items in my hotbar. I could just have the Estus and the pendant only, but I don't want to add everything back again, that takes too long. I always really liked reaching Manus, traveling through Ulasil, Every time you get deeper into the city, it becomes more corrupt with the Abyss until you finally reach the Abyss yourself and explore the darkened void that it is. And you can even have Sif fight alongside you if you rescued him down there, which is pretty epic. I can never do it though because I can't really see the poor boy getting hit by Manus' Wombo combo. It'd make me even more sad. I can't look at that. Number 3. Dark Eater Midir. One Abyss boss to another Abyss boss. We have Dark Eater Midir. Well, they finally did it. They perfected the Dragon Boss format. No joke, this is the best dragon fight in the whole series. Honestly, it's better than a lot of the dragon fights from Elden Ring in my opinion. The build up to this fight is great. You gotta dodge Midir's onslaught on the mountainside and then knock him down into the pit below, where you can then fight him for real. They basically took the best aspect of every dragon fight and put them into Midir. Diverse moves like Calamite, other damaging types like Sin, large menacing stature like Ancient Dragon, he's got it all. The first phase feels similar to the Demon Prince, mainly because the claw swipe attack he does is almost identical, except he mixes fire breath into it. Midir keeps it fresh with his fire breath, bites, tail sweeps, and flying drive-bys. It's easy to get under Midir to avoid most attacks, but like the Demon Prince, you do pretty pitiful damage to anything that's not the head, so that's the main focus. The second phase though is pretty crazy because he has a wicked strong laser attack that could potentially one-shot you if you're not at full health. It lasts a really long time and can track you, so dodging it might be a bit tough. He does get burned out at the end of the attack, so you can get some free hits in. There's also added dark magic during the second phase, which can stun you and get you nailed by a charging bite or something. This is how a rampaging dragon fight should be. Now, I haven't played all of Elden Ring, so there might be some dragons I haven't seen that could be better than Midir, but it'll be hard to top the king. Number 2, Sister Fried. This is where all the bosses went for that first DLC. Sister Fried is unique in that she has 3 distinctly different phases, each with their own health bar. The first phase just involves Fried, and I like to see her as more of a diverse and faster version of Priscilla. She fights with a scythe and can even turn invisible for a sneak attack, although I don't think Fried takes too kindly to bone wheels or sack men. She can also build up freeze, which hey, that's a status I rarely brought up. Only Vort and the Great Wolf could do that before. I don't think there was any other boss before that could build up freeze. The first phase is not too difficult. The move where she goes invisible can be tough to deal with if you don't know how it works. The second phase is where it starts to get more serious because Father Ariandel enters the fight with his big old pot. He resurrects Fried and it becomes a multi-boss fight. This is new. They share a health bar instead of having 2 separate ones. Fried will be in the back mainly shooting out waves of ice, the occasional scythe combo, and the potential to heal Ariandel. Father Ariandel is the aggressive one during the fight, slamming his bowl onto the ground and dumping fire onto you. It might be better to focus on Fried during this phase because that heal can be annoying if it goes off, although you can stagger Ariandel and deal a fuck ton of damage to him. I don't know how I was able to do it, but I wiped down half of his health bar in like 10 seconds. After that, you think the fight is over, you get a Titanite slab, and move on. Well, no. Phase 3, baby, this time it's with Black Flame Fried. If you've played Bloodborne, this phase is very close to the style Maria used during her fight. Lots of combos along with spinning air slashes. It's good to be aggressive back because rolling can only get you so far sometimes. There's a lot of crap to be mindful of, but this fight isn't impossible. Fried has like negative 50 poise, so if you hit her, chances are you'll stun her too. You can also parry her, at least in the first phase. I'm not sure about the last one. I think you can parry her during that phase too. It's a really awesome fight and makes up for the lack of fights in this DLC. But of course, we have one guy left. I know it's probably a predictable choice, but how could I not put this guy at number 1? Number 1, Slave Knight Gale. This is it. The perfect Dark Souls fight. The last fight in the final DLC of Dark Souls, Slave Knight Gale. The man who brought you into the DLC and seemed like an ally at first, turns out to become a major threat at the very end. Everything we've dealt with so far has led to this. Bosses that were exhilarating, bosses that made you cry, bosses that made you learn how to master the game, bosses like the Causus Demon, all led up to this, the final act of our journey. Gale is off his rocker at this point, drunk with blood like a hunter. This first phase feels very similar to Artorias in the way the Gale moves around and attacks. Although the impalement is new and he fucking flings you across the field. It's nuts. The arena is massive and you can go pretty much anywhere. No walls to slow you down, no instant death pits, no random enemies. It's perfect. By this point, the first phase is manageable. You've dealt with this kind of crap before. The second phase gets a bit more interesting. Gale incorporates his cape of all things into his moveset, giving him a move to punish early rolls. He's a lot less berserk in this mode and fights like an actual swordsman, until he pulls out the crossbow and machine guns you down. He can also throw out these light discs that act like boomerangs, so it could hit you on the way back. Phase 2 is pretty short-lived because Phase 3 is where Gale pulls out everything. He'll start to become more erratic, moving much faster, and his cape could leave behind floating projectiles. The coolest thing he does is jump in the air and shoot his crossbow down onto you. He does it with such flair, you'll wonder how someone like that could perform such an insane move. Then you realize he's a video game character. This is the best boss in all of Dark Souls, a perfect send-off to a fantastic series of games, and Scholar of the First Sin. Well, damn, that was a long list. Bet most of you expected Gale to be at number 1. I wonder how many of you guys thought I was going to complain about adaptability throughout the whole video, like I did the autolock for my Pikmin ranking. I fooled you all. I didn't talk about it that much. Well, this video has gone on long enough, so thanks for watching and getting this far. Goodbye.